So if you look at yourself, take a picture from the side, and you see you have a really flat low back. Your tailbone is down here. You're just one flat straight line here, but don't push to try to do like 15 minutes and then hurt your back. Put yourself into a hinge so you're pulling that tailbone up like that atomic wedgie. You might get some stretch in the hamstrings with the bent knees. And you're just holding this position, that's it. Now let's talk about how often to do these exercises. You can think about the stretches and the strength exercises as separate sessions if that helps you get everything done.
Would you mind explaining the glutes again? That felt real nice.
Go back to your corner. Grab a hold of this kettlebell here, and you're gonna notice that I keep my spine like this. I have a little lordosis. I'm not curling my spine like this. So now I've given you 6 exercises to fix your posterior pelvic tilt, including all kinds of extra little options. In this video, I'm going to show you how to fix posterior pelvic tilt. I'm gonna show you what it is. I'm gonna show you 6 exercises to fix posterior pelvic tilt. So if you wanna understand all the do's and the don'ts and the how's and the why's, stay tuned to the end. Let's get ready to think right, move right, and feel right. Posterior pelvic tilt is when your pelvis is tilting like this. Anterior pelvic tilt is when your pelvis is tilting like that. So when you are in posterior pelvic tilt, you're going to have a flatter low back. You're probably going to have some discomfort in your low back. You're probably going to have some pretty flat, flabby glutes back here. When you're in anterior pelvic tilt, you're gonna have a butt that sticks out. You're gonna have a big curve in your lower back. So if you look at yourself, take a picture from the side, and you see you have a really flat low back. Your tailbone is down here. You're just one flat straight line here. It's highly likely that you have posterior pelvic tilt. In addition, if you look at yourself from the side and you notice that if you draw a plumb line right along the side of your body, that your upper body tends to be in forward of that plumb line, then there's a pretty good chance that you have posterior pelvic tilt, or at least that your low back is in this flat position and you need to do some things to try to straighten that back out. Now, if you do have posterior pelvic tilt, don't panic. I want you to ATM, always think muscles, because this is not some weird genetic thing that you'll never be able to change. This is about repeated position practice. So let's talk about how you can fix your posterior pelvic tilt. To fix this, we want to understand some of the habits that cause it and what muscles are involved. So first of all, habits include just bad posture when you're sitting in your chair all darn day and staring at a screen or staring at your phone like this. You put yourself into this C curve with your spine, and you may also be slouching a bunch when you're sitting in your office chair, or when you're just slumped into your couch all night long watching Netflix or YouTube. Poor movement patterns can also make this worse and really ingrain the posterior pelvic tilt. For example, if you have really tight hamstrings and glutes, you might find that you can't really bend properly, so you just bend your spine and get your spine used to being in this C curve, and then when you go to get up, you're just kind of stuck. Which brings us to the muscles. So the glutes and the hamstrings can put you into posterior pelvic tilt when they're contracted, and if they can't relax and they can't lengthen properly, they will often keep you stuck in posterior pelvic tilt with that flat lower spine. On the other side of your body, you have your abs, you have your six-pack muscles, you have your keg muscles, the obliques, the transversus abdominis, the rectus abdominis. All those muscles can get shortened up, can get trapped in that short position, and then you can't get your pelvis to go into anterior pelvic tilt because those muscles are too tight. But the solution isn't all about stretching. There are also muscles that need to be strengthened, and the muscles on the back of your body back here, these spinal erectors, the spinal extensors, need to be strong enough to maintain that curvature, that lumbar curve that you're supposed to have. In addition, you should have some decently strong hip flexors. So that could be the high quads, it could be the actual hip flexor muscles like psoas and iliacus, and it could even be some of those inner thigh muscles, those adductor muscles that assist in hip flexion. The reason being is hip flexion is when the pelvic bone is getting tilted forward and the angle between the pelvic bone and the femur gets a little bit smaller. So those hip flexor muscles help that happen, and if they're too weak, then it's not gonna happen.
Would you mind explaining the glutes again? That felt real nice.
Go back to your corner. And before we jump into the exercises that'll help you fix your posterior pelvic tilt, I want to ask you two questions. Number one, how did you end up on this video? What made you click this? What got you thinking about posterior pelvic tilt? What can we do to help you? Drop me a comment down below. And number two question is, have you subscribed yet? Because if you haven't, you should do that right now. Hit the subscribe button, and as long as you're doing that, hit the like button too. All right, now let's get into the exercises. So let's start with the stretches. The first one is to stretch out your hamstrings. Simple way to do this is to just put your foot up onto something like your couch or something lower, especially if you have very stiff, tight hamstrings. You're going to think about keeping the curve in your low back, meaning you're pulling the tailbone up like somebody's giving you a wedgie. That's going to put tension on the hamstrings. When you do this, you want to make sure that you maintain a square position to the couch. So a lot of times what will happen is if I'm here and I'm really stiff and I try to go into a little more anterior pelvic tilt and feel that stretch on the hamstrings, my body will want to cheat out of it. So you want to try to maintain that squareness so that you're parallel to that, right? So you're not allowing yourself to twist out. You're going boom like this. Now, if you are so tight that feels dangerous, like you feel like your hamstring muscles are going to pop or explode near the knee or near the attachment at the pelvis, then please use your best judgment and adjust your position a little bit. Either use something that's a little bit lower than your couch or whatever you're using. You can bend your knee a little bit. You can rotate a little bit to take some of the tension off and over time come back to being more square. And as you get more flexible, you can start to lean in more. Anterior pelvic tilt, pulling the tailbone up as you go forward, forward, forward. It's not about bending your spine to get your nose closer to your knee or to your toes, but rather pull that tailbone up more, and that's gonna bring everything closer in. It's gonna make this angle right here get smaller as you get more length in the hamstrings, and that's what we want. If you do anything else, if you bend your spine, you're just making the whole posterior pelvic tilt situation, you're making that whole flat back situation worse, so don't do it. Another hamstring option is to bend your knees, put yourself into a hinge, so you're pulling that tailbone up like that atomic wedgie. You might get some stretch in the hamstrings with the bent knees. That's fine, enjoy that stretch. And then when you want more stretch, you can try to straighten out the knees while still giving yourself that atomic wedgie, and that's gonna put way more stretch into the hamstrings. Over time, you can keep trying to straighten the knees more and more and more without losing that spine, right? You don't want this to happen as you're straightening out. So you bend your knees, you bend over to wherever you think you can handle, then you straighten out the knees, still maintaining that lumbar lordosis, it's called, right? It's like I'm trying to create a little bowl here so I can catch rainwater during the drought, okay? And then as you get better at this, you can try to go lower into that bent over hinge, and then keep trying to stretch out those hamstrings, getting nice and deep into this, what's called hip flexion, making this angle smaller, bringing the femur closer, closer to your rib cage, right? But closer to your spine. So as your hamstrings get better at that, you're gonna find that when you're standing, you're not getting so much of that pull, and when you go to bend, you're gonna find you have more range of motion without the spine compensating. When you're doing hamstring stretches, I suggest that you hold for a minimum of 1 minute, maybe up to 2 minutes if you feel like you can tolerate it. Make sure that the stretch intensity is not crazy strong. You shouldn't feel like you're gonna die. Keep it at a moderate intensity so that you can still breathe and try to get those muscles to relax. I've done 2 detailed videos about how long to hold stretches and also how to stretch properly. So if you need some of those basic fundamentals, please check the description box when you're done with this video and watch those videos. I will link to them down there. Please watch them, they're very important. As we touched on before, the glutes are a good spot to stretch out because those also can keep you trapped in posterior pelvic tilt. You're still welcome to touch my glutes again. Stay in your corner, don't talk to the camera. So here are a couple options for stretching your glutes. One is just being down on the floor with a pillow, cushion, whatever, yoga block like I got here, and you're just going to put your knee There, it's gonna be elevated. Then you're going to just find an angle that feels tough. So you're thinking about bringing your whole torso forward and closing down this angle. Now you might find going here is really tough. You might find going here is really tough. You might find going over here is really tough. Any angle that you find being tough but tolerable is great. Where you want to feel the stretch is going to be all around here. When we're stretching, we want to do at least a minute, maybe 2 minutes on each side, and then hopefully 2 sets. And then if you got a stiffer side, do an extra set, or at least like an extra 30 seconds for that stiffer side. Another option is to just use some sort of elevated surface, like a bench or a couch, and then you can just put your leg up on it. You can let the foot and ankle be off on the side to kind of reduce any strain or stress in the knee. And over time, you can make a little change, which I'll explain in a second. And you're going to do basically the same thing where you're trying to fold forward over that femur, and you're gonna focus on feeling the stretch on the opening angle. If that doesn't make sense, again, watch the videos that I'm gonna link in the description box. But in short, the opening angle is where the muscles are getting longer. That's that stretching side. You don't wanna feel the strain on the closing angle, which is this side where we're closing down, right? So we're trying to feel the stretch in the glutes. You're going down only as far as you can tolerate, that feels like a manageable challenge, and just get deeper and deeper over time. Explore those angles that feel tough. If it feels really, really tough, or it feels like your knee's gonna explode, let that foot and ankle just drop down a little bit more. That's gonna be pretty helpful. And then you can just explore safely. And of course, like I said, do both sides. And finally, another option is to just be sitting either on the floor or on a chair like this and just bring the leg up over. You may not have the flexibility to do this, so if not, too bad, don't do it this way, just do one of the floor versions. And then we're gonna go like this. We're just kind of pulling the knee across the body or even towards the chest, just different angles, kind of play around, see what feels tough, and just get in there, breathe. You may find that you need to really focus on pulling yourself into that atomic wedgie because your glutes are so tight that it pulls you into this rounded back position. So atomic wedgie if you need it. Make sure you feel the stretch in the right place. Enjoy, hold for 1 to 2 minutes, 2 sets on each side, and some extra time or an extra set on that stiffer side. And finally, we need to talk about the abs because those can lock you down into this flat spine position. So what are we gonna do about it? Hey, I wanna take a quick second to say thank you to these people for supporting this channel with their donations via PayPal. If you wanna support this channel too, it means a lot to me. You can use the links that you'll find in the description box or just find me at paypal.me/uprighthealth. Your donations really help me make more videos and make sure that I don't have to make ads about supplements, pills, powders, or whatever. So thank you very much for your support. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and also get some freebies at my website at uprighthealth.com/newsletter so you and I always stay connected. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to it. There's a couple things we're gonna do about it. We can start on all fours and just try to do the yoga cow position where you're just letting your spine sag down towards the floor. And if that's tough for you, it's cool. Just enjoy that. Take some breaths, take 5 to 10 breaths, 30 to 60 seconds here. Just teaching your spine to go into lordosis, right? Getting ready to catch the rainwater, right? Then, if that feels like, yeah, not too big a deal, you can be down like this, okay? And you can think about raising your chest up, letting your whole spine go into extension. And if you feel like there's pulling or tugging or resistance from your abs, it means your abs are trapping you in posterior pelvic tilt. So we're just gonna hang out here, breathe, relax. Don't push into any pinching, so keep the range tolerable. Should be a moderate challenge, but it should not feel like your spine is like sending you alarm signals. If you feel alarm signals, lower yourself down and just go to where it's tolerable. And then over time, you bring yourself up. It might not be today, it might be next week, it might be in 2 weeks, right? So don't rush it. you don't want to cripple yourself or give yourself an injury in your spinal muscles. It's just, that's not fun, okay? Over time, as you get better and better at it, you can try to raise yourself up a little bit more. As you come up higher, you're probably gonna wanna keep your thighs tight, your legs together. A little bit of a glute squeeze can help you feel a little more protected. Another option is to do this on an elevated surface. This can feel a lot more manageable as long as you have the upper body strength and you have the shoulder and hand and wrist strength to do it. So that allows you to focus the stretch, I find, a little bit better into the abs without feeling so much jamming into the spine. Now, when you're doing these ab stretches, you want to make sure you're staying safe. So hold only as long as you can without feeling like your low back is getting destroyed. You want to just feel the stretch in your abdominals. So it could be 5 seconds, it could be 10 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, work yourself up to a minute or longer if you feel like you can actually handle that safely. But don't push to try to do like 15 minutes and then hurt your back. And if you're just out and about and you want to try to open up, it's always nice to just kind of stretch open, get your arms out, get your chest open, let your breastbone rise up, really get into that anterior tilt, give yourself that atomic wedgie, and enjoy opening that front side to just get your whole body used to not being in that posterior pelvic tilt position. And a final optional stretch would be for your quads and hip flexors. I know it doesn't seem like you would want to stretch your quads and hip flexors since those are the ones that are going to help you get into anterior pelvic tilt when they're stronger and shorter. But sometimes people are locked up in their pelvis because everything front and back is just super stiff. So instead of being able to actually move like this so that your pelvis is going anterior and posterior, your hip flexors are so stiff and unable to do anything, you can't feel them or send commands, that you start to compensate with your spine instead of being able to move your hips. So this is an optional stretch for your quads and hip flexors. You're just gonna get in front of your couch and you're gonna put your knee on the couch and your foot behind you. So this is going to start to stretch your thigh muscles, those are your quads, and your hip flexors, depending on how you prioritize and how you angle your body. If you're like this and you're really pushing your pelvis at an angle kind of towards the floor, you're gonna get more of your hip flexors. The more you're up and forcing the knee angle to get smaller and smaller, the more you're gonna stretch your quads. So you can play around with the positioning to see what needs more stretch. In addition, you can play around with how your pelvis is rotated, whether it's this way or this way, turning your whole body to it. You're gonna find that there are different angles that really get into some tight, gnarly stuff. Also, you wanna think about being able to get your butt to your heels. So depending on your couch, you may need to bring your foot up if you have the flexibility in the quadriceps muscles, right? So you're just gonna be going back like this, keeping the tailbone. That's gonna help you stretch out the quads and the hip flexors so you can then start getting better control. And also we will talk about strengthening the hip flexors so that you can control your pelvis and get it more into anterior pelvic tilt later in this video. Hold these stretches for, again, around 1 minute to 2 minutes if you can. Do it at an intensity that feels manageable. Please do not try to hurt yourself, all right? Now that you've got all the stretches in mind, let's talk about some of the strength exercises. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet, you should hit that subscribe button. Okay, let's go. So this exercise is gonna help you build up strength in your lower back and help your spine maintain that better position, that lordosis that you are missing. What you're gonna need is some light weight on some kind of platform like a couch or a chair. Use something like 5 to 10 pounds max when you're first starting and then gradually increase it as you feel safe. I'm just gonna grab a hold of this kettlebell here and you're gonna notice that I keep my spine like this. I have a little lordosis. I'm not curling my spine like this. So this is where all that stretching that we were doing to increase your ability to get hip flexion without losing lower back position comes into play. So keep it like that, then you're going to lift it up. Now, if that's already challenging, if this amount of motion is challenging, it's fine. Just keep doing it like this, okay? If you're using dumbbells, your hands will obviously be more like this, and you'll just be holding on a little bit differently, but whatever feels comfortable is fine. You're lifting up and back down. Do 2 to 3 sets of around 10 repetitions if that feels manageable and doable for you. If you feel like you need to do less, that's fine. Do less, and over time, increase the number of reps that you're doing. If you're starting off with heavier weight because you didn't follow my instructions about using lightweight, then please use lighter weight and stop trying to jump ahead. Use lightweight when you start, build up some strength in your lower back before you get too heavy with the weight. If you are ready to go deeper, if this feels like, well, it's not really hard at all, then you can pick up that weight, step away from your platform, and then you're going to do the same thing. We're gonna maintain that lordosis in the low back. We're gonna hold that end position, and then we're gonna slowly come back up. We're gonna pause here, take a couple breaths, maintaining that lower back lordosis, and then again, important to use a weight that you can definitely safely manage. So please start off light and only go through the range that you feel you can handle while still maintaining that low back position. And up. When we're doing this, we're gonna make sure that the abdominals are staying active. You're not trying to crunch really hard, but make sure they're active. You don't wanna let your belly button just kind of hang out like you've got a beer belly or something. You want it to stay in. You don't want your belly button to just go bleh. You want to keep it in, but don't try to suck it all the way to your spine. Don't try to hide your belly. Just don't try to show off your belly, okay? And still maintain that lower back position. So again, sets of approximately 10 repetitions. Take some rest and then do it again, 2 to 3 sets. And again, make sure it's a weight that you feel like you can safely handle, all right? Now let's talk about the next exercise. So the next exercise is going to help us build up more strength and stability in the spine. So you're gonna need either a cable machine at the gym, or you can just get some training bands like this that are reasonably long, and you're just gonna find a nice anchor point, and you're gonna step away. That tension is going to try to pull you this way, and we're just going to maintain our posture in this position, right? So we're just finding that tension we can manage, increasing the tension over time. If you're using the cable machine at the gym, then you can just keep increasing the load that you're working against, and you're just holding this position. That's it. You want to make sure that you have that lordosis in your spine. You want to make sure you're not getting pulled into this, and you're just going to hold this for about 20 to 30 seconds, take a rest, and then do it again, and then build up to a cumulative 1 minute. If you can do it all as 1 minute, but you probably can't, so let's not do that to start, okay? When you first start, make sure you're giving yourself adequate rest and you're giving yourself a chance to improve safely, okay? Now, one option you can do with this exercise is make sure that you have the ability to pull your shoulder blades back. So this is called scapular retraction. And when you're doing this, if you are weak in those muscles that control your shoulder blades, you're gonna find yourself kind of being pulled like this, which will be indicative of having some weak spinal extensors here, as well as weak rhomboids and middle traps. So you wanna be able to pull those pull those scaps together like that, your scapula together. So when you're in this position, you can be working on pulling those shoulder blades back just a little bit. You don't have to go crazy with it, but if you feel like you're in this position and you're just getting dragged like that, make sure that you're standing tall and that you're pulling those shoulder blades back a little bit and maintaining, okay? For people who really have trouble with the shoulder blades, you can do little repetitions. So just little squeezes back. And as you get better control over that, you'll feel like you can just maintain that slightly pulled back position. A lot of people will find that one of the shoulders, usually your mouse hand, that shoulder blade doesn't feel like it's alive. It'll just feel numb between the shoulder blade and the spine. You like can't feel that those muscles are working. It's pretty normal. I get that too if I don't train my scapular muscles. So you can just hold it for that 20, 30 seconds or even up to a minute, just maintaining that. And that's it. The difference between this and the deadlift motion that I showed you previously is that maximum resistance happens while you're standing. In the deadlift, you're down here, maximum resistance is happening here, so you're training your spine to maintain its integrity when you're in a hip flex position. And then when you're doing it here with the bands or the cables, you are learning to stabilize your spine, you're programming that in a standing position. So both of those are helpful and important for you to get good at. And if you don't want to use a cable or a band, you can always just lie down on the floor, make sure you got a little lordosis there, and then just bring yourself up from the floor and hold this position. You can also think about lifting your feet up like this and just hold, pretend you're skydiving and whoosh, dropping through the air. Hold this position for 20, 30 seconds, build up to at least a minute. You should feel these muscles right here working, your glutes working, the backs of your legs working as well. You can be creative about hand and leg position, but basically you're working on building up that so you have more strength for spinal extension. And finally, I want to talk about strengthening your hip flexors. So first, I'm going to show you how to do it in a nice, easy seated position, which will help you when you're in that hip flex position. And then we're going to talk about how to do it in a open hip position, in that hip extended position. So sitting down, you can just lift your leg up. So this is closing the angle between the femur and the spine, right? So we're going like this, we're lifting, we're holding, getting a little fatigue up here, and then putting it back down. We can start off doing these exercises with the leg just straight out in front of you, but you can also work on different angles as well when you feel like you want to get a little creative, okay? So we're just lifting, holding, getting fatigue, and back down. This can be 10 to 20 repetitions without any weight, but if you want to make it harder, put a weight on your leg. So you could use a dumbbell, you can use a small kettlebell, you can use a weight plate, and you're just going to be lifting up. Now the key here is when you're doing this, we don't want to be really accentuating posterior pelvic tilt or the curling of your spine, right? So when you're lifting, you don't want to be going like this to try to do it. You want to try to maintain a little more of that anterior tilt because you are really good at posterior pelvic tilt, okay? Now, you may find you have to be a little bit tilted back, and I'll accept that. That's okay. And for many of us, we have to have a tiny little bit of posterior pelvic tilt to make sure this feels good and that we have full range of motion. But I really don't want you to get into this, okay? And then you're gonna feel those muscles there. The hip flexors, again, are the ones that help us pull into hip flexion. That's what helps pull the pelvis into anterior pelvic tilt. But when we're standing, you'll notice that's a different configuration. We need those hip flexors to also be strong when we're in that hip extended position. So let's talk about that. Whoa. All right, let's get down on the floor. You are going to have your legs out like this. You're gonna just lift one leg up and back down. When you're doing this, we're maintaining a curve in your lower back. It helps to have this leg straight down like so that your pelvis stays in that more anteriorly tilted position, okay? Now when you're doing this, you're gonna notice that maximum resistance is happening somewhere actually around here. So you don't have to go all the way up. You can actually just go through a limited range, feeling the hip flexors work while you maintain that lower back position, okay? Around 10 to 20 reps if you're not using any resistance, and then you switch sides. Really important to make sure your lower back is not flattening into the floor, and just go through a range that feels like it's challenging those hip flexors. So you've done both sides, 2 sets most likely, 10 to 20. If you want to make it harder, you can just put your hands under your butt to give you a little stability, still maintain that lower back position. Then you can just hold this, right? Just have your legs just a little tiny bit off the floor and hold this. You're gonna feel your abs have to work. You're gonna feel like your hip flexors have to work. And if you wanna make this more interesting, you can just flutter up and down like you're trying to fan somebody down there because it's a really hot day. and just blowing some wind at them. You can also do it like this, kicking like that. And if that's not enough fun for you, you could also add ankle weights to this or get on a bench or a bed. Let me show you what that looks like. So what you're gonna do is just put yourself on an elevated surface like a bench or a bed, and then you're able to get lower down. So instead of having your feet hovering over the ground, you're actually at a more hip extended position with your feet a little bit lower, which is putting you more into anterior pelvic tilt. But you gotta be real careful with this. Make sure you have the ab strength to maintain this position and the hip flexor strength to maintain this position safely with no pain at all. Not even a hint of pain in your lower back. I also have some videos that'll help you strengthen your hip flexors safely. Be sure to check out the description box down below. Now let's talk about how often to do these exercises. You can think about the stretches and the strength exercises as separate sessions if that helps you get everything done. So you can do your stretch session at one time of day, and then later that same day or maybe the next day you do your strength session. Now it's ideal to have them back to back so that you can increase your flexibility so you have a little more range of motion that you can then use during your strength exercises. But if it's not realistic or practical for you, then break things up. Now, when you first start, I would suggest doing these stretch and strength sessions twice a week. So you're gonna do Monday and Thursday for your stretch session. And if you can do everything together, then they all go together. But if you need to break it up, say it's Monday stretch, Tuesday strength, Thursday stretch, Friday strength, that's fine. Just break it up in some way that works for your schedule. Over time, if you feel like your body responds well and you can handle more, go ahead and do them more often. I would say around 4 times a week is probably the maximum. In addition, since we're being practical, if you find that one of these exercises just doesn't do anything for you, it's irrelevant for you, then you can drop it out. You don't have to do it. Your goal ultimately is to learn how to listen to your body and then put your body in those challenges that help it grow and improve. Remember that your posterior pelvic tilt is all about repeated position practice. And the more you practice, the better position, the easier you're gonna find it is to get into that better position. So if you want to improve your posterior pelvic tilt, you want to fix your posterior pelvic tilt, you have to keep practicing. And that brings us to the topic of how you sit while you're working. If you are constantly sitting in a slump in posterior pelvic tilt, you are going to get really good at posterior pelvic tilt. So it's a great idea to be mindful about this. Think about using your hip flexors, which should be getting stronger over time, to maintain that better position. You don't want your pelvis to be constantly tipped back onto your tailbone like this, because it's going to put your low back into that kyphotic position. It's going to keep you in that C curve. You want to use the hip flexors that are here on the front to pull the pelvis like this. You want to be using your lower back muscles to maintain that lordosis. Of course, we need to find a balance, okay? If you do this a whole lot and you just stay here a whole lot all the time, you're gonna end up with anterior pelvic tilt. But for right now, since you have posterior pelvic tilt, it's very important for you to practice getting into this position, maintaining this position, and being stronger in this position. Over time, it's totally okay to go back and forth into different positions so that you have the option, you have volition at every position. So now I've given you 6 exercises to fix your posterior pelvic tilt, including all kinds of extra little options, and I've also explained to you why you have posterior pelvic tilt in the first place. So remember to ATM, always think muscles, and address these muscles in a way that improves your posture and improves your ability to determine what posture you're in at any given moment. Hopefully I've answered all your questions, but if I haven't, please drop me a comment down below. If you have chronic aches and pains that you're trying to fix on your own, be sure to go to uprighthealth.com/DIY to find all my do-it-yourself programs that'll help you rebuild your body at home. And while you're there, don't forget to use the link to get on my newsletter so you and I stay connected no matter what the algorithm decides to do. For more free videos to help you with your pelvis and your whole body and whatever, check these out here. Like, share, and subscribe with the bell notification on. And as always, I hope you remember that pain sucks. Life shouldn't.